right, let's go ahead and bring it in and take a look at what do we have here, because I haven't seen it yet. All right. Oh, wow. Hello, my dear sewing friends, it's Elisa here. And today I truly hope that we get to experience something very beautiful, very unique, and dare I say, maybe even a little bit magical. Now, I've done this for the first time many years ago, so it's fair to say that I'm a total newbie, and I really can't wait to see the results. And that's right, today we are dipping our toes into the magic of ice dyeing. Now, this might seem like a big ordeal, dyeing anything, but this technique is actually surprisingly not as messy and not as involved as you might think, because ice or snow does all the heavy lifting for you. But regardless of that, the very first step for me is to actually prep my work area, because anytime you work with dye or fabric paints or anything else like that, doesn't really matter how non-messy it is, you want to make sure that you have a designated space so that way you don't end up contaminating anything else that you have in your work area. So at this point you might be asking, what exactly is ice dyeing, or as sometimes referred as snow dyeing? And in simpler terms, from what I gathered, it's basically a fabric or yarn dyeing process where you have three components. You have your fabric or yarn, you have your special dye that is cold water dye, and then you have your ice or snow. And when you combine them all together, beautiful things happen. So I just grabbed the things that I already had at home. It felt a little bit like doing scavenger hunt and seeing the multi-purposeness of the items that you already own. So this is a storage bin that I actively use in my sewing space, and you've seen it already in the linen pants video where I did dye my own linen. So we're going to be using this today, and this is actually something that my husband uses outside. We have chickens, and he does a little bit of woodworking. So I think he used it as some sort of a sifter for whatever he needed. So when I mentioned that I'm going to be doing ice dye and I need some sort of rack where to rest my fabric while the ice melts, he said, well, take a look at this one and see if you can use it, because it's a really nice big piece. And indeed it really is nice, and it's actually pretty smooth, and that was one of my concerns, because I didn't want to snag my fabric on this wire, but it's actually really smooth. So I think I'm going to be using this one. As we get started, as I mentioned, I first tried this technique many years ago, so I barely remember anything from that time. So this truly is an experiment, like trying it for the first time. And because this is an experiment, I wanted to try 3 different types of fabric. As you know, I have 10 or so yards of white linen, and I got it for that particular reason, to experiment with different fabric dyeing techniques and then use that fabric for my garments. So first is going to be linen, and then I'm going to use cotton in the form of cotton t-shirt, one of those t-shirts that you get like a Hobby Lobby or a Joann's in order to like dye them or put some sort of vinyl on them or things like that. And the third fabric is going to be silk. All right, let's take a look what the instructions say. So I did print these out from Dharma's website, and I will link that website and that article for you guys in the info box below. So basically, I'll be following that with a little bit of improvisation when it comes to colors and what kind of design I want. But everything else, I'm pretty much just doing step by step what they're telling me to do. So the first thing they're saying is to pre-wash your garment or fabric with a professional textile detergent. Done. Now, the next step is mix up your soda ash, 2 cups per gallon of water, and add in your dyeable items. Then let them soak for about 15 minutes. After that, pull them out and squeeze out the excess solution, and you can save the soda ash for more dyeing later. That's a great tip, so that way you can actually reuse what you already have. Alright, so here I have pale aqua, fuchsia, navy, bubblegum in this set. And I also have hot hibiscus, cobalt blue, and turquoise. So I definitely think that we can play around with it, and these colors I don't want to say should, they could create some really beautiful combinations. So fingers crossed, and hopefully we'll get to see some really fun things at the very end. Now for this next step, I've seen a ton of different variations. So I've seen where people take the garment, place it on a rack, then you sprinkle your powder dye, and then you put the ice over that, so the dye is under ice. Or you can do the reverse, where the dye is over ice. So you place your garment, you place your ice, and then you sprinkle your powder dye. Or I've seen also some really beautiful results where you take the garment and you even take some aluminum foil, you crunch it up in little balls, you place it underneath your garment or your fabric, and then you sprinkle the dye, then you put the ice, and then you sprinkle more dye. So the ice is kind of sandwiched between two layers of dye. So this is where I think you can really be creative and have fun with it and just see where it takes you, and have a huge surprise when you finally rinse these things out and see how it comes out. And although this is not a tutorial, still a gentle reminder to not to forget your PPEs when you're working on your DIY. So your hand protection with gloves from any corrosive materials and dyes that you might be working with, of course, your face protection and your nose, your mouth protection as well. This is a little bit of an overkill. Majority of the resources will suggest to use a dust mask when you're working with ice dyeing, but this is what I had at home, and this works really well for it as well. And of course, don't forget to protect your clothes if you are worried about staining them. This is a denim apron that I made from old denim jeans some time ago, so you can use something like that, or you can of course use something a little bit bigger that covers more space. These clothes are something that I wear at home, so I'm not really that concerned about it. But anyway, I just wanted to make sure that you guys do your own research. Definitely take a look at all of the protective measures that you need to take when you're doing anything. So in total, I did 3 cuts of 1 yard each of linen. The first one, I just kind of scrunched it all up as is. The second one, I decided to put some aluminum foil balls inside to see what kind of designs that will create. And then I decided to also start with that piece. So first I did a little bit of bubble gum right on top of the fabric. Then I added the darker pink and a little bit of a navy. Then I loaded that with ice, and just for a good measure, right on top of that I decided, you know what, let's just sprinkle a little bit more bubble gum. And that was the first batch. The second batch, the one that I just scrunched up as is, I decided to go ahead, put the ice on top of the fabric, and then sprinkle that with some really bright turquoise and hot hibiscus. For the third cut of linen, and by the way, this was done over the span of multiple days because I just simply don't have enough space for all of that to be done at one time. So for the third cut, I decided to go with the same aluminum balls. This time I made a little bit more just to kind of have more of that effect, of that beautiful effect. And then I decided to go with 2 colors that are very similar to each other, with bubblegum pink and with darker pink. So I decided to sprinkle with bubblegum first, then the ice, and then the hot pink on top. Now for the cotton t-shirt and the yard of silk that I had, I decided to go with a completely different color scheme. This time I decided to play around with this really pale aqua and really nice deep navy blue, and here I had some really unexpected results. So for the cotton t-shirt, I sprinkled just a little bit of pale aqua and quite a bit of navy blue. As you guys might know, navy is my favorite color. And then for the silk piece, I decided to go the other way around, sprinkle quite a bit of the aqua and just a tiny bit of navy blue. And here I had an unexpected bump in the road. So here it seems like I'm having a bit of a fail. This is that piece of silk, and look at that, none of the dye actually stuck, like barely any dye stuck. and I wonder what's the problem with it, because all of the cotton and linen has been soaked in soda ash, and this was soaked in vinegar as per the directions on the bottle of the dye. So what I think I'm gonna do is, to remedy this, I'm gonna go ahead and rinse it and soak it in soda ash instead of vinegar and see if that helps. Ice dyeing you're supposed to cover and then let it sit for about 24 hours. I've seen some resources suggest 24 to 48 hours, but 24 hours seems to be the general rule of thumb of how long you'll need to let it sit. And while I was seeing that dye slowly drip into the tubs, I started to wonder, can I actually reuse that dye that's accumulating on the bottom of the tub? So I grabbed a little scrap piece of white cotton. This was actually not treated with soda ash, so I just grabbed it, I dipped it inside, and this was the result from the blue tub. And I thought, well, wait a second, I have some really pretty white fabric with some burnout flowers on it that I'm pretty sure is some sort of cotton blend, and I wonder if I can dye it and get some interesting result. So that's exactly what I did. After I emptied the first batch of the linen fabric, I did gather the blue dye into a separate container, and then I submerged the fabric into that. But while I was dyeing the completely pink linen piece, I was thinking, you know what, let's just go ahead and put the fabric that I want to soak up the dye that's dripping right underneath that and complete two things at the same time. So I asked my husband for a little bit of help so that way he can pick up the whole thing, and that way I can slide in that fabric underneath and let it soak up all of that dye that is dripping from above. After all of the dyeing projects were done, the instructions said to rinse them out in cold water first until the water mainly runs clear, and then you need to go ahead and wash them on a hot cycle with a professional laundry detergent. And that's exactly what I did. All right, let's go ahead, bring it in and take a look at what do we have here, because I haven't seen it yet. All right. Oh, wow. I was not expecting that at all. Look at these colors. And I didn't have yellow dye in it at all. It's just that bubblegum pink that did bleed as yellow, and it almost looks like the middle of a flower. So it's bizarre and beautiful at the same time. It's really, like, look at this one. This one looks like a flower. Look at that. There's a yellow middle and little speckles of blue, and then it just kind of blooms. Let me show you this in like full size so that way you can see the actual picture. First, let's go ahead and take a look at this piece. This was 100% medium weight linen, and this piece was the one where I crunched up some aluminum foil and I put it underneath, and on top went this bubblegum pink, then darker pink, and then a little bit of navy as well. And I know that all together it looks like a complete mess, but when you actually look a little bit closer, you see some really beautiful blooms. But you can see that the bubblegum separated into these yellow speckles, which is kind of really unexpected. So one thing that I've learned with this technique is that if you want total control of how this is going to turn out, this probably isn't for that type of fabric dyeing. This is totally unexpected, but it's so much fun. It really is. Next piece was this bright turquoise and this beautiful hot hibiscus. And here, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Galaxy, because that turquoise, especially where it's a little bit on the lighter side right over here, when the light shines through it, it literally looks like space, at least to me. The very first thing that I thought when I saw this was, if you take artistic toothbrush or, you know, a paintbrush or anything, you dip it in white acrylic paint and then you just speckle it on top, it would literally look like Galaxy. So this definitely is a very interesting piece. I'm not a fan of turquoise blue, but I do like it in this combination. So we'll see what I'm going to create with this one. Now, the next piece of linen was this two-tone pink one. Here, I really decided to go just with a more uniform color, so that way it creates a more uniform yardage of fabric. And I actually really love it. And here you also see that yellow speckle from the bubblegum pink, which again is very unexpected. I would never think that pink would have yellow in it and that it would, you know, create these unexpected little specks on fabric, but that is a very pleasant surprise. And I do like how this came out as well. This corner over here is a little bit lighter than the rest, but I like it. I think it adds a little bit of character. Next, we have the t-shirt with pale aqua and navy blue. And here, what's the most interesting part is that pale aqua did not come through as pale aqua. Instead, it's sort of this lime green, but I did add just a tiny bit of that pale aqua, so maybe that's how it manifests itself when there isn't enough of that dye or pigment, who knows. And I also got some really interesting magenta speckles from the navy blue, which was also very unexpected, and we even have some purple hues right over there as well. So again, if you are looking for a very controlled result, this isn't it, because I would not expect this result from what I was envisioning that this is going to be. And then we have a sort of a failed piece, which was this yard of silk. As you can see, soda ash did help, but you can barely see the colors. And also, just like on the cotton t-shirt, pale aqua manifested itself in this lime green color, which was very unexpected. And yeah, you can barely see the colors. I mean, they're there. You can also see a little bit of magenta over here from the navy, which was again very unexpected. It's a little bit disappointing because from my previous experience with dyeing silk with different techniques, usually it takes color pretty well. But I think I need to take a look at it a little bit closer and see maybe there was a user error, maybe there was something else that I didn't do, although I'm pretty sure that I followed step by step, but who knows. So definitely do a little bit of extra research if you want to dye silk. And then of course we have these two fabrics that I dyed with the leftover dye that dripped into the tubs. This was the pink one. Look at that, how fun! Isn't that fun? You can still see the flowers, but it does add a little bit of extra, you know, extra happiness into the fabric, because it being white was a little bit, I don't know, it was just, you know, it was just, I loved the fabric on its own, but it being white was just a little bit underwhelming. So I think that this definitely adds a little bit of character to it, and we can make something beautiful out of it. Wasn't that magical? There is one thing that I have to warn you about when it comes to ice dye. Nothing bad, nothing bad, but at least for me, I have to remind myself to stop at some point, because curiosity just boils over, and then I start to think, wait, what if I combine these two colors together? What happens if I scrunch it up this way? Or if I scrunch it up this way? Or what happens if I, you know, layer ice a little bit at a time, or this or that? And possibilities are just endless, and it feels so magical. It also feels very hands-on, but at the same time very very hands off. So it's really difficult to explain this experience until you try it yourself, and I truly hope that you do. All of the materials that I used today are not expensive, so they will last you for quite a few different batches of ice dyeing, so definitely give it a try. I will leave the link for the one that I used in the info box below, but of course do additional research and find what works for you. Well, my dear sewing friends, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy sewing. Check out this video right over here where I did make my linen pants and dye my own fabric, and until next time, happy, thoughtful sewing, and I'll see you very soon. Bye!